The night my wife left me, she called me a man with potential, and somehow that hurt worse than if she had called me a failure. Potential meant I was not enough yet. Potential meant I was a half-built house she was tired of walking through. Potential meant she had spent 15 years standing beside me, while secretly waiting for a better version of my life to arrive. And when it did not come dressed in a tailored suit with a country club membership and a new Mercedes in the driveway, she decided I was the problem. Lauren stood by the front door with a cream-colored suitcase at her feet, one hand wrapped around the handle, the other holding her phone like it was a lifeline to a world where I did not belong. The porch light behind her turned the rain into thin gold wires falling past the windows. Outside, at the curb, Bradley Kane sat in his black Mercedes with the engine running, headlights shining across our lawn like he had already bought the place. I remember the sound more than anything. The soft hum of that expensive car. The ticking of the wall clock above the kitchen entry. The rain tapping against the glass. The silence between my wife and me stretching so tight it felt like one wrong word would split the whole house open. She looked beautiful that night in a camel coat I had bought her 2 Christmases ago, back when I still thought gifts could say what tired people forgot how to say out loud. Her hair was smooth, her makeup perfect, her expression calm in that polished way people get when they have rehearsed a cruelty long enough to call it honesty. I was standing 10 feet away in old jeans and a gray sweatshirt, the same one she hated because the cuffs had gone loose. I had been fixing the garbage disposal when she came downstairs with the suitcase. My hands still smelled faintly like dish soap and metal. There is something humiliating about being left while holding a wrench. It makes your whole life look smaller than it is. Lauren glanced toward the window, toward Bradley, then back at me. She did not cry. That was the part my mind kept circling. 15 years of marriage, a mortgage, late-night grocery runs, airport pickups, her mother's surgeries, my father's funeral, all the ordinary glue that holds 2 people together, and she did not cry. She just took a breath and said, "I am tired, Ethan. I am tired of waiting for you to become the man you always said you would be." I looked at her, waiting for the rest, because people like Lauren never throw the first stone without polishing it. She gave me the rest. "I am tired of coupons, tired of your old pickup, tired of pretending this life is enough. I am tired of being married to potential." The word landed quietly. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet is worse sometimes. Quiet lets the damage spread. I nodded once because my body did not know what else to do. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my sweatshirt, but I did not reach for it. I could feel the vibration against my leg, small and steady, like a warning from another life. Lauren saw it, and for a second her mouth tightened. Even then, she thought it was probably a bill collector, a work email, some little reminder of the life she was walking away from. She looked almost relieved. Bradley tapped his horn once. Not long. Just a short, confident sound, the kind of sound a man makes when he thinks another man has already lost. Lauren picked up her suitcase. I asked her if this was really what she wanted. My voice came out even, which surprised me. Inside, something had gone cold and clear, like a lake before sunrise. She said Bradley understands ambition. Bradley knows how to move forward. You are a good man, Ethan, but good does not build a future. I almost laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because Good had built everything she had ever leaned on. Good had paid the electric bill during her unpaid internship. Good had driven 12 hours through snow when her father got sick in Michigan. Good had sat in hospital parking lots, signed tax forms, fixed leaky faucets, held her hand through bad news, and kept quiet when her friends joked that I dressed like someone who still used paper maps. But I did not say any of that. A man learns, somewhere around 40, that defending your worth to someone determined not to see it is like pouring water into sand. She stepped closer, kissed my cheek, and it felt like a receipt being stamped final. Then she whispered, "I hope someday you figure it out." The door opened. Cold rain air pushed into the foyer and moved through the house like it owned the place. She walked out without looking back. Bradley got out just long enough to put her suitcase in the trunk. He wore a navy overcoat, and that easy smile men wear when they mistake timing for victory. Lauren climbed into the passenger seat. The Mercedes pulled away, its red taillights smearing through the rain until they disappeared at the end of Maple Ridge Drive. I stood there with the door still open, one hand on the knob, the other hanging useless at my side. The house behind me was warm, lit, paid for, and emptier than any room I had ever known. My phone buzzed again. This time I took it out. The screen glowed in the dim foyer. One new email. Northbridge Analytics shareholder event confirmed. I stared at those words for a long moment, and the rain blew in across my shoes. 12 years earlier, I had taken shares instead of salary because a failing startup could not afford to pay me what my work was worth. Lauren had laughed at the folder when I brought it home. More useless paperwork, she had said. That night, standing in the doorway with her perfume still fading from the air and her lover's tire tracks dark on the street, I opened the email. The first line said the acquisition had been approved. The second line said all founding shareholders were required to attend the closing gala in Columbus. The third line had a number I read 4 times before my breathing changed. I closed the door slowly. Not because I was calm, because some moments are too big for noise. The house was quiet after the door clicked shut, and the only sound was the rain against the roof, small and steady, like a drum keeping time to a life paused. Ethan walked slowly into the kitchen, his bare feet cold against the hardwood, the envelope from Northbridge Analytics still in his hand. He set it on the counter and watched the condensation from his coffee cup gather in tiny beads and drip down the sides. The kitchen smelled faintly of toast, and the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. Where Lauren had passed. He did not sit. He did not pour a second cup. He just stood there, looking at the envelope as if it contained the measure of all the years he had lived in half-truths and quiet effort. 12 years of forgotten shares, of small smiles unnoticed, of long nights calculating the difference between what the world thought he was and what he actually had, all resting in that envelope. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his fingers catching on the slight dampness from the rain he had tracked in from the porch. He opened the envelope slowly, carefully, unfolding each sheet of paper like it was fragile, like it might crumble under the weight of expectation. The first page listed the final terms of the acquisition, the purchase price, and the allocation of shares. Ethan skimmed quickly, then stopped. He counted the numbers twice, 3 times, each time the figure remaining the same. $38 million after taxes and vesting. He felt the chest tighten, a pressure that was not excitement or elation, but something quieter, a deep recognition that the world had underestimated him, that Lauren had left him believing he was nothing while he had quietly grown into something undeniable. He put the papers down and walked over to the small desk by the window, looking out at the street where the Mercedes had disappeared moments ago. The rain continued to fall, heavier now, a steady curtain that blurred the streetlights into long streaks. He did not check the phone, did not call anyone. He sat quietly, feeling the gravity of time and patience and the subtle art of letting the world misjudge him. Hours passed. The room darkened. The envelope sat in front of him, still unfolded, like a silent companion to the realization that his life had shifted without fanfare, without confrontation, without the noise Lauren had insisted upon. He thought about the small things he had done over the years, the overtime at the startup, the careful bookkeeping of investments, the choices to save instead of spending, the decisions Lauren had mocked as insignificant, inconsequential. Every one of those choices had been an unseen seed, and now the tree had grown tall, enough to cast a shadow across everything Lauren thought she had left him. Ethan poured a fresh cup of coffee, the steam curling lazily into the air, and he sipped slowly, feeling the warmth spread from his chest outward, grounding him in the moment. The rain tapped a faster rhythm against the glass now, echoing the pulse of his thoughts. He imagined the gala in Columbus, the room filled with familiar faces, some shocked, some indifferent, all about to see a side of him they had not expected. He smiled faintly, not a sharp or loud expression, just a slight curl of the lips that held everything quiet and controlled, a controlled power that only he knew existed. His eyes wandered to the empty driveway, imagining Lauren and Bradley, imagining their conversation, the assumptions they had made, the world they had confidently judged him to inhabit. None of it mattered. The numbers did. The patience did. The quiet years spent building, observing, and waiting did. Ethan knew that when he walked into that gala, every step would carry the weight of all that time, but also the lightness of knowing he had not rushed, had not shouted, had not needed to prove anything beyond the truth of his own life. He rose, picked up the envelope, and carried it to the living room, placing it next to his coat and keys. He looked around the space, the home he had kept in quiet stability, and breathed slowly, listening to the rain, to the faint hum of the refrigerator, to the rhythm of a life that had been underestimated and now was poised to reveal itself. Outside, the street was slick and shining, reflections of the streetlights dancing on puddles like whispers of the night's possibilities. Ethan walked to the window and watched, thinking not of revenge, not of gloating, but of the power of having lived his life correctly, quietly, without theatrics. He folded his arms, leaned back slightly, and let the realization settle that the world had assumed he was powerless, and yet, in silence, he had grown strong enough that the next moments, the next weeks, would simply show the truth. He turned back to the room, took another slow sip of coffee, and let the steady beat of the rain match the steady beat of his patience, knowing that everything was about to fall into place exactly as it should. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the house still felt damp with everything Lauren had left behind. Ethan woke in the recliner instead of the bed, one hand resting on the Northbridge folder, the living room washed in pale Ohio sunlight. For a few seconds, he forgot. That is how shock works. It gives you one clean breath before it hands your life back to you. Then he saw her coffee mug still by the sink, the throw blanket folded over the arm of the couch the way she liked it, the empty space on the entry table where her keys used to sit, and the night returned in pieces. The suitcase, the Mercedes, the word potential. Ethan stood slowly, his back stiff, his shirt wrinkled from sleeping wrong, and walked to the kitchen. He made coffee because routine was a rope, and sometimes a man holds on to the smallest rope he can find. The machine sputtered, the smell of dark roast filled the room, and for the first time in 15 years, he did not make a second cup. That hit harder than the email. Not $38 million. Not the acquisition. One empty mug. He leaned against the counter and looked out at the wet driveway where his old Ford F-150 sat under a maple tree, rainwater still beating on the hood. Lauren hated that truck. She used to call it a museum piece with tires. I used to laugh because I thought marriage made insults softer. It does not. It just teaches you to swallow them with breakfast. Ethan had bought that truck used from a retired electrician in Dayton 8 years earlier. 212,000 miles, torn seat, cracked dashboard, engine steady as a church bell. He kept it because it ran, because it was paid off, because a man who understands value does not throw something away just because other people stop admiring it. Lauren never understood that. To her, value had to shine. It had to arrive valet parked, photographed, complimented by strangers. If people could not see it from the sidewalk, she did not believe it existed. Ethan took his coffee to the small desk by the front window and opened his laptop. There were 4 new emails from Northbridge, one from a law firm in Columbus, and one calendar invite marked mandatory shareholder verification. He clicked through them carefully. No rush, no trembling hands, no dramatic music in his head. Just terms, dates, signatures, identification requirements, banking instructions. Money, when it is real, comes with paperwork. That was something Bradley Kane probably did not understand. Bradley understood the costume of money. Ethan was beginning to understand the weight of it. At 9:15, his phone rang. The caller identification showed Marlowe and Finch, attorneys at law. He answered on the third ring. Mr. Walker, a woman said, "This is Claire Donnelly with Marlowe and Finch. I represent the shareholder review team for Northbridge Analytics. Are you available to confirm some details?" Her voice sounded calm, professional, the kind of voice that makes chaos sit up straight and put on a tie. Ethan looked at the empty kitchen, then at the folder. "Yes," he said, "I am available." Claire walked him through the trust documents, the original equity agreement, the amended vesting schedule, and the acquisition payout structure. Ethan listened, wrote notes on a yellow legal pad, and let the facts settle into place. Founding contributor. 4.8%. Fully vested. Closing event in Columbus in 12 days. Estimated post-tax disbursement, $38.6 million, subject to final review. There it was again. Not a fantasy. Not a maybe. A number with lawyers attached to it. Claire paused after reading the figure, as if she was used to people reacting. Ethan did not give her much. He just said, "Understood." She asked if he had any questions. He had one. "Has anyone requested information about my position?" The line went quiet for half a second, not long enough to be suspicious, but long enough to matter. "No unauthorized parties have access to your details," she said. The trust kept your name out of normal public filings until the closing announcement. Ethan looked toward the street. A school bus hissed to a stop at the corner. Children climbed aboard with backpacks bouncing, their morning intact, their worlds still small. Enough to be repaired with lunch money and a note from home. He said, "I would like it to stay that way until the event." Claire did not ask why. Good attorneys rarely ask questions they do not need answered. She said they could maintain confidentiality until the formal shareholder recognition. After the call ended, Ethan sat still for a long time. The yellow legal pad was covered in neat handwriting, but one phrase stood apart from the others: formal shareholder recognition. Recognition. Strange word. He had spent years not needing it, then years pretending not to want it, then one night being abandoned because someone else decided he would never earn it. He thought back to Northbridge before it became a name worth printing on gala invitations. Back then, it was 5 people in a rented office above a tax preparation place outside Columbus. The carpet smelled like dust and burned coffee. The heat barely worked in January. They had one folding table, 3 mismatched chairs, and a whiteboard with a crack down the middle. Ethan had been 30, newly married, still believing sacrifice was romantic if you explained it correctly. He drove 70 miles each way twice a week after his regular job, building risk models while Lauren slept or watched television, or asked why he kept wasting gas on nerds with no funding. Northbridge could not pay him, not properly. So they offered shares. Paper instead of money. Future instead of comfort. Ethan remembered bringing the folder home, proud in the foolish, private way men get proud when they think they are planting something for their family. Lauren had flipped through the pages at the kitchen table, her nail tapping the signature line. "So this is not a paycheck," she had said. "It is a promise," Ethan told her. She laughed softly, not cruel enough to start a fight, just cruel enough to leave a mark. Promises do not pay mortgages. She was not completely wrong. That was the hard part. Rent was real. Groceries were real. Utility bills did not care about vision. But Ethan had seen something in that company the way a farmer sees spring in frozen ground. Not hope. Pattern. The product worked. The clients renewed. The data was clean. The founders were tired but honest. He trusted honest more than shiny. For 12 years, he kept the folder in a fireproof box beneath old insurance papers and car titles. Not hidden like a secret from the law. Hidden like a seed from bad weather. Lauren never asked about it again. Not once. That morning, Ethan walked to the hallway closet and took down the fireproof box. The metal was cool under his hands. He opened it on the kitchen table and pulled out the original stock agreement, the trust paperwork, and a faded photograph from the first Northbridge office Christmas party. 6 people in cheap sweaters stood under fluorescent lights, holding paper cups of store-brand eggnog. Ethan stood at the far left, younger, thinner, smiling like a man who believed time would eventually tell the truth. He touched the edge of the photograph. Then his phone lit up with a text from Lauren. "I hope you are doing okay." He stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then he turned the phone face down, slid the Northbridge papers into a clean folder, and made himself breakfast for one. By noon, the kitchen had stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like a workshop. Ethan cleared one side of the table, laid out the Northbridge documents in neat rows, and weighted the corners with a salt shaker, a coffee mug, a tape measure, and the little ceramic bowl Lauren used to keep loose change in but never actually used. Sunlight came through the blinds in thin white stripes, cutting across signatures, dates, and numbers that had waited 12 years to matter. He read every page again, not because he doubted them, because a man who has been dismissed for long enough learns to check the bolts twice before he turns the key. The trust was clean. The vesting schedule was clean. The shareholder agreement carried his signature, younger and sharper, written by a version of himself who still believed Lauren would one day thank him for thinking beyond the month in front of them. Ethan remembered that man with a tenderness that surprised him. He had not been foolish. He had just been married to someone who needed proof before she offered faith. There is a difference. Faith stands with you while the field is still dirt. Proof arrives after the harvest and acts like it helped plant. Lauren had always been a proof person. She needed the receipt, the applause, the visible upgrade. Ethan used to think that came from fear. Her parents had divorced when she was 14, and she had spent high school watching her mother stretch grocery money across 2 weeks like a magic trick nobody clapped for. Lauren hated smallness after that. Small houses, small cars, small vacations, small dreams. When they first met at a 4th of July barbecue in Westerville, that hunger looked like ambition. She was 24, laughing under string lights, white sundress moving in the summer air, a paper plate in one hand and a plastic cup of lemonade in the other. She had asked Ethan what he did, and when he told her he worked in data modeling and risk systems, she tilted her head and said, "So you predict disasters for a living?" He told her, "No, I try to prevent them." She laughed then, a real laugh, bright enough to make him forget the mosquitoes and the heat rising from the driveway. For years, that was the version of Lauren he kept defending to himself. The one who danced barefoot in the kitchen while pasta water boiled over. The one who brought him soup when a winter flu pinned him to the couch. The one who said she did not care where they lived as long as they could build something honest. That woman had existed. Ethan refused to rewrite history just because the ending had gone bad. But endings have a way of walking backward through a story, touching old memories with cold fingers. Now, when he looked back, he saw the first small shifts. The way Lauren stopped saying "our plan" and started saying "your idea." The way she smiled tightly when their friends bought larger homes in newer developments. The way she lingered beside luxury cars and parking lots and pretended she was only admiring the color. The way she asked, with a joke folded around the blade, if his old Ford came with a museum plaque. None of it seemed fatal at the time. Marriage does not usually break with one loud crack. It weakens in quiet places. A sigh at dinner. A phone turned away. A compliment withheld. A laugh shared with someone else because it costs less effort than kindness at home. Bradley Kane found those weak places the way water finds a basement wall. Ethan first met him at a charity mixer Lauren's marketing firm hosted downtown. Bradley was not handsome in the movie star sense, but he had the polish of a man who knew where to stand under good lighting. Expensive haircut, navy suit, shoes so glossy they looked wet. He shook Ethan's hand and held it half a second too long, smiling with all his teeth. "Lauren has told me a lot about you," Bradley said. The sentence sounded friendly until Ethan noticed what was missing. Respect. Later that night, Bradley told a story about closing a six-figure client over 18 holes at a golf club near Dublin, Ohio. People laughed, Lauren leaned in, and Ethan stood beside her holding a glass of club soda, listening to a man confuse noise with substance. When Bradley asked what Ethan drove, Lauren answered before he could. An old pickup he loves more than common sense. The table chuckled. Ethan smiled because that is what husbands do when they are trying not to make their wives look cruel in public. He carried that moment home like a stone in his coat pocket. Not heavy enough to stop him, heavy enough to remember. Over the next year, Bradley became a name that appeared too often. Bradley said this. Bradley thinks that. Bradley knows people. Bradley says real success requires visible momentum. Ethan heard it all while fixing cabinet hinges, comparing insurance quotes, and making sure the mortgage cleared before the 10th of every month. He was building a wall one brick at a time, and she was admiring a billboard. Now, with the Northbridge papers spread across the kitchen, Ethan understood that Lauren had not left because of one man. Bradley was just the exit sign she had been waiting to see lit up. At 2:30, Ethan called Claire Donnelly again. He asked about updating his banking information, tax planning, and whether bringing personal counsel to the closing was allowed. Claire said yes to all three. Then she recommended a financial advisory team in Columbus that handled sudden liquidity events. Sudden liquidity? Ethan almost smiled. There was nothing sudden about it. 12 years of restraint. 12 years of being the boring one. 12 years of hearing wait and later and not yet turn into proof that he lacked ambition. The money was new to the account, maybe. It was not new to his character. After the call, he drove his Ford to the bank, windshield wipers squeaking across glass still spotted from the morning rain. The truck smelled like old vinyl, coffee, and sawdust from a shelf he had helped his neighbor install the week before. At a red light, his phone buzzed in the cup holder. Another text from Lauren. "I know last night was hard. I just need space to think." Ethan looked at the message until the light turned green. Then he set the phone back down without answering. Space. She had left in another man's car and called it space. The word was so polished it almost hid the truth. Almost. At the bank, Ethan sat with a branch manager named Denise, a woman with silver hair, red glasses, and the no-nonsense calm of someone who had seen every kind of personal storm pass across her desk. He explained only what was necessary. Upcoming acquisition. Large transfer. Need to prepare accounts. Denise did not pry. She just nodded, printed forms, and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Walker." Ethan looked down at his hands resting on the desk. Same hands Lauren said never reached far enough. Same hands that fixed sinks, changed oil, signed the old stock agreement, and held a marriage together longer than pride should have allowed. "Thank you," he said. His voice stayed steady, but something inside him shifted, quiet and permanent, like a lock turning open in a room he had forgotten he owned. The bank parking lot looked ordinary when Ethan stepped back outside, which felt almost insulting. A gray sedan rolled through the drive-through lane. A woman loaded groceries into the trunk of a minivan across the street. Two teenagers in red jackets crossed at the light, laughing at something on a phone. The world kept moving in its plain, practical way, completely unaware that Ethan Walker had just prepared a place for more money than Lauren had ever imagined him touching. He stood beside his old Ford for a moment with the folder under his arm and the keys in his palm, letting the wind move across his face. It smelled like wet pavement, cut grass, and gasoline from the station on the corner. Real smells. Ground-level smells. The kind of smells Bradley Kane would never notice from behind tinted windows. Ethan climbed into the truck and sat there without starting it. The vinyl seat gave its familiar tired creak. The dashboard clock was 3 minutes slow. A fast food napkin from last week was tucked near the gear shift. This was the part Lauren had never understood. She saw old and thought failure. Ethan saw old and thought paid for, dependable, honest. He rested both hands on the steering wheel and let the quiet settle. His phone lit up again. Lauren. Not a text this time. A call. He watched her name pulse on the screen. Once. Twice. 3 times. He let it go to voicemail. Some doors do not need to be slammed. They just need to stop opening. On the drive home, Maple Ridge Drive looked washed clean by the rain, every lawn bright, every roofline sharp under the clearing sky. The neighborhood had always been Lauren's compromise. Nice, but not elite. Comfortable, but not impressive enough to mention with pride at her office parties. She wanted a house in a gated community north of Columbus, something with stone pillars and a kitchen island big enough to impress women who measured happiness by square footage. Ethan had wanted this house because the mortgage made sense, the school district was strong, and the maple tree out front turned red every October like the whole yard was holding a lantern. Practical beauty. Lauren called it settling. He parked in the driveway and noticed the faint tire marks Bradley's Mercedes had left near the curb. Dark half-moons on the damp asphalt. Proof that some people only pass through long enough to stain what they never helped build. Inside, the house greeted him with the small hum of appliances and the stale silence of rooms adjusting to absence. Ethan set the bank folder beside the Northbridge papers, then walked upstairs for the first time since she had left. Their bedroom door was half open. He stood there, longer than he meant to. The bed was made on her side and wrinkled on his. Her nightstand was empty except for a faint square in the dust where her jewelry tray had been. The closet door stood open, hangers spaced unevenly, a few dresses gone, several left behind like she had chosen a new life in a hurry, but still expected the old one to store her overflow. Ethan stepped into the closet and took down a cardboard box from the top shelf. Not dramatic, not angry, just methodical. He folded the remaining scarves, wrapped her framed college photo in tissue paper, placed a pair of shoes in a separate bag so the heels would not scratch anything. There is a discipline to letting go. People imagine it as a single decision, but it is not. It is one hanger, one drawer, one toothbrush cup, one half-used bottle of lotion at a time. By 5 o'clock, 3 boxes sat in the hallway labeled Lauren. He did not write my wife. That word had become too expensive. Downstairs, he checked his voicemail. Her voice filled the kitchen, softer than it had been the night before. Ethan, I just wanted to make sure you are not doing anything rash. Bradley says emotions can make people act irrationally after separation. I think we should be mature about this. The message ended with a little sigh, practiced and delicate, like she was already telling herself a story where leaving him was an act of courage and he was the unstable part of the plot. Ethan played it once, then deleted it. Bradley says, those 2 words told him everything. She had not just left the house. She had transferred authority. For 15 years, Ethan had been the man she asked to check the furnace, review the taxes, talk to the insurance company, drive through snow. sit beside her mother at medical appointments, and make the hard calls when life got heavy. Now Bradley said, and Lauren listened. Ethan opened the refrigerator and took out eggs, spinach, and a block of cheddar. He made an omelet at the stove, the same cheap pan they had bought at Target during their first year of marriage. It had a scratch near the handle and still worked fine. He ate at the kitchen table, alone, without turning on the television. Outside, evenings settled over the neighborhood in blue layers. Porch lights came on one by one. Across the street, Mr. Alvarez rolled his trash bins to the curb and waved through the window. Ethan waved back. Normal life continued. That was its mercy and its cruelty. After dinner, he opened his laptop and scheduled 3 appointments for the next morning. One with a divorce attorney named Robert Caldwell, one with a certified public accountant recommended by Claire Donnelly, and one with a financial advisory firm in downtown Columbus. He stared at the confirmed appointments, then added a 4th task to his calendar: change locks. Not because Lauren was dangerous, because access belongs to people who respect the house. At 8:17, an email arrived from Northbridge with details for the closing gala. Black tie preferred. Guest optional. Media limited. Shareholder recognition ceremony at 8:45 in the evening. Ethan read that line twice. Guest optional. The words hit in a strange place. For years, every event had meant standing beside Lauren while she scanned the room for someone more useful to talk to. Every company dinner, every fundraiser, every neighborhood holiday party, he had been introduced as my husband, Ethan, with a tone that sounded like an apology wearing lipstick. Now, for the first time, he had an invitation that did not require him to be anyone's accessory. He clicked no guest. The confirmation appeared instantly. One attendee, Ethan Walker. He leaned back in the chair and looked around the kitchen. The boxes in the hallway. The paperwork on the table. The old truck in the driveway. The house was not empty anymore. It was clearing space. His phone buzzed one last time before night fully settled. A photo message from Lauren. She and Bradley were seated at a rooftop restaurant downtown, city lights behind them, wine glasses raised, her smile bright and sharp. Under it, she had typed, "I hope someday you find happiness too." Ethan looked at the picture for a long moment. Bradley's watch was angled toward the camera. Lauren's hand rested near his sleeve, showing just enough of the bracelet Ethan had bought her after her promotion. It was not a message. It was a performance. Ethan set the phone face down, opened the Northbridge folder, and placed the gala invitation on top. Then he turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs. For the first time in years, the silence in the house did not feel like abandonment. It felt like a witness waiting for the truth to arrive. The morning of the closing gala arrived with clear skies over Columbus, sunlight glinting off the glass towers downtown, reflecting across streets that hummed with routine traffic and city life moving forward without pause. Ethan Walker woke early, the Northbridge folder resting on the nightstand beside his bed, stacked neatly with his watch, keys, and a pen, ready for signatures and final checks. He stretched slowly, feeling the tension in his shoulders, a reminder of the long months of patience, the quiet work while others assumed he was standing still. He dressed in a navy blue suit, cut clean and simple, a tie with a subtle pattern, polished shoes reflecting the first light in the room. The house was quiet, empty in the best sense, the boxes from Lauren still in the hallway but orderly, their presence more a marker of closure than of absence. He made coffee, the aroma rich and steady, the steam curling into the air like the patience he had carried over years, rising slowly and filling the kitchen with normalcy, with the weight of routine. Sitting at the table, he ran his hands over the folder, touching the papers lightly, affirming their presence, the validation of work done without applause. Outside, his Ford F-150 sat in the driveway, its worn paint and reliable tires a testament to steady consistency over style. Ethan glanced at it, a quiet smile forming. Real life, real work, real results. The drive to the event was uneventful, allowing time to think, to rehearse in his mind how the evening might unfold without rehearsed fear, without panic, without pretending to be anyone other than the man he had quietly become. Columbus streets, wet from a light morning mist, glinted under the rising sun. He listened to the hum of the truck, the rhythm of tires on asphalt, the subtle noises of a city alive. Parking a few blocks from the venue, he took the folder in hand, the envelope for final verification tucked safely inside, and walked toward the building, the sound of his shoes echoing softly against the pavement. Inside, the lobby smelled of polished wood, fresh flowers, and faint coffee. Staff moved efficiently, greeting arriving guests with smiles that did not know him yet, smiles he would not need. The room was bright, modern, with glass walls and views of the skyline beyond. Ethan checked his watch. 8:35. The gala opened officially in 10 minutes. The invitation had said black tie, optional guests. He was alone. That was intentional. No shoulder to lean on, no partner to shield, no need to prove himself to anyone but the papers in his hands. Staff guided him to a side room for final document verification. Claire Donnelly and a junior associate waited with tablets, signatures ready, digital verification pending. Ethan reviewed the forms again, confirming trust identification, vesting clauses, and final payout. Each initial, each tick mark, reaffirmed his patience, his foresight, and the quiet power he had held for over a decade. By 9 o'clock, verification complete, he left the side room and walked into the main hall. Guests had begun to arrive. There were city executives, a few journalists, and other shareholders. Drinks were served, but he did not take one. His presence alone carried a quiet authority. People noticed without understanding why. Ethan moved slowly across the room, observing arrangements, noting exits and entrances, timing for speeches, and seating for the recognition ceremony. He found his designated seat near the center, facing the podium, the lights positioned just so. He opened the folder again, reviewing notes, numbers, and contingencies one last time. Across the room, Lauren appeared, accompanied by Bradley Kane. She looked radiant in a fitted dress, smiling, her posture upright, confidence present. Bradley was animated, speaking loudly, gesturing with his hands, drawing attention to himself and her. Ethan watched, calm, steady, the controlled energy within him unmatched by the performance across the room. The moment was precise, an interval. Before truth would arrive. Lauren did not see him, not yet. She was in her own space, measuring, calculating, enjoying her perception of advantage. Ethan sipped water slowly, feeling the weight of each decision, the patience of years culminating in this quiet, inevitable moment. At 9:45, the moderator called the room to attention. The lights dimmed slightly, a spotlight on the podium, and Ethan recognized the cue. The ceremony was about to begin. He closed the folder with care, placed it beside him on the chair, and straightened. The air in the room shifted subtly, the anticipation, the expectation, the quiet whispers, all focusing on a single point, him. Ethan Walker, alone, prepared to step forward, not to challenge anyone, not to boast, not to speak loudly, but simply to exist in the space that had been his all along, defined not by visibility or applause, but by patience, accuracy, and the long, steady work that had brought him to this point. The gallery lights highlighted his profile, the subtle reflection of years of unnoticed diligence shining softly. And for the first time since Lauren left, he felt not absence, but full presence, a calm anticipation that the rest of the night would unfold exactly as it was meant to. The room was silent as Ethan approached the podium, the spotlight catching the clean line of his suit and the steady rhythm of his steps. Guests shifted in their seats, sensing a change in energy, though they could not yet name it. The moderator introduced him, emphasizing the importance of the shareholder recognition and the trust in the founding contributors to maintain the integrity of the company. Ethan nodded once, briefly, acknowledging the formality before taking a breath and looking across the room. Lauren and Bradley were seated together at a corner table, glasses in hand, smiles measured, as if they already believed the evening belonged to them. Ethan's presence alone altered the atmosphere, subtle but undeniable, like a pulse under the carpet. He cleared his throat gently, enough for the microphone to catch the soft authority in his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I am Ethan Walker, a founding shareholder." The words were simple, flat, almost understated, but they carried the weight of 12 years of quiet effort, patience, and unobserved growth. The projector behind him lit up with the Northbridge logo, and the details of the acquisition appeared for the first time on the screen, figures precise, approvals confirmed, legal clearances completed. Gasps moved through the room like a ripple on a pond. People leaned forward, realizing that the man they had assumed invisible, unremarkable, had quietly accumulated a power that demanded recognition. Ethan's gaze did not linger on Lauren, but he knew she saw him. He knew the tightness around her eyes, the subtle tension in Bradley's posture, the way the conversation across the table had stalled mid-sentence. He spoke calmly, without flourish, describing his role in the company, the history of the shares, the trust structure, and the final acquisition terms. Each word was measured, controlled, delivering facts without emotion, letting the reality speak louder than commentary ever could. The room absorbed the information, executives whispering to colleagues, journalists shifting pens over notebooks, Lauren's grip tightening slightly on her glass. Ethan stepped back from the microphone, nodding at the staff who had verified the documents, acknowledging their work, and then allowed the moment to settle. No shouting, no drama, just a man standing in the truth of his own accomplishments. Lauren's smile faltered, replaced by a glance toward Bradley that carried the first hints of doubt. The man she had believed weak, ordinary, incapable, was now recognized for his patience, foresight, and financial acumen. Ethan noticed the change not through gloating, but observation, the quiet satisfaction of someone who had waited for reality to catch up. The moderator resumed with the schedule, directing attention to the next speaker, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. The whispers and looks were not about anyone else in the room. They were about him. The weight of assumptions, the disregard, the years of silent judgment, all contrasted sharply with the recognition now assigned. Ethan moved off the stage and toward his seat, hands steady. Folder tucked under his arm, body calm. He sat, straight-backed, allowing the applause to pass without forcing acknowledgement, letting it linger in the room like the quiet echo of a bell. Across the floor, Lauren adjusted in her chair, her gaze fixed on him, realizing in subtle, piercing increments that the man she had dismissed, the one she thought lacked vision, had quietly orchestrated a future that now made her present seem fragile and incomplete. Bradley's conversation with colleagues fell into awkward pauses as he realized the true scale of Ethan's achievement, the depth of foresight he had underestimated for so long. Ethan sipped water from a glass beside him, each motion slow, deliberate, embodying the controlled authority he had cultivated in silence. The ceremony continued, yet the focal point was unmistakably clear. The quiet man who had waited, observed, calculated, and grown without spectacle now stood validated by every number, signature, and acknowledgement the documents could provide. He felt the calm satisfaction of someone who had endured, who had acted without impulsiveness, and who now held not just proof of success, but the silent power that comes from patience and strategic foresight. The room, unaware of the countless mornings and nights behind these documents, was witnessing the culmination of years of careful, unseen work. Ethan remained composed, aware, and fully present, every gesture deliberate, his posture reflecting the depth of accomplishment unshaken by the noise around him. He understood that the evening's recognition was more than ceremony. It was the tangible validation of a life lived with foresight, integrity, and quiet strength, a reminder that true influence often grows unseen until the right moment allows it to shine unmistakably. Lauren found him near the glass wall overlooking downtown Columbus, where the city lights spread beneath the night like a map of choices already made. The ceremony had moved into its quieter phase, all soft jazz, low conversations, and waiters carrying trays between clusters of people suddenly eager to introduce themselves to Ethan Walker. Men who had walked past him earlier now leaned in with business cards. Women from investment firms smiled with professional warmth. A regional reporter asked if he would consider a short interview after the event. Ethan answered politely, never too much, never too little, keeping his words clean and his posture easy. He had learned a long time ago that the loudest man in the room is usually trying to rent authority by the hour. Real authority does not rush to prove it is real. Then he saw Lauren's reflection in the glass before he heard her voice. She stood behind him in that fitted dress, shoulders squared, face composed with the same careful control she used at office parties when she wanted strangers to believe her life had no cracks. But the cracks were there now. He could see them around her eyes, in the tension of her mouth, in the way her fingers held her clutched too tightly. "Ethan," she said. His name sounded different in her voice. smaller, unsure of where to land. He turned slowly, not dramatically, just enough to face her without giving the moment more weight than it deserved. Lauren looked at him as if she had discovered a room in her own house that had been locked for 15 years. "I did not know," she said. The words came out soft, almost accusing, as if his privacy had been some betrayal committed against her expectations. Ethan looked past her for a moment. Bradley was near the bar, pretending to laugh with two men from a venture fund, but his eyes kept cutting back toward them. His face had lost its showroom confidence. Under the ballroom lights, the expensive watch looked less like success and more like evidence of effort. Ethan brought his attention back to Lauren. "No," he said. "You did not ask." That sentence settled between them cleanly. Not sharp, not loud. Clean is worse when someone has spent years hiding behind fog. Lauren swallowed, glanced down, then back up. "You never told me it was worth anything." Ethan almost smiled, but not quite. "I did," he said. "Years ago. You called it useless paperwork." Her eyes flickered. Memory had touched her. The kitchen table, the folder, her nail tapping the signature line. Her laugh, light enough to deny, cruel enough to remain. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried another door. "I was scared, Ethan. I wanted security. I wanted to feel like we were moving somewhere." He nodded once. "I know." And that was true. He did know. He had known her fear, worked around it, paid for it, softened himself for it, translated it into patience until patience became a language only he was speaking. Lauren stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Bradley said you were stuck. He said a man who keeps waiting for the right time is really just afraid to move." Ethan looked over her shoulder. Bradley had stopped pretending not to watch. There it was, the invisible third chair that had been sitting in their marriage long before she packed the suitcase. Not Bradley himself, exactly. What he represented. Visible momentum. Public confidence. The kind of success that photographs well. Ethan looked back at her and said, "Bradley did not convince you of anything you were not already willing to believe." Her face changed then. Not anger. Not yet. Something more vulnerable, and therefore more dangerous to her pride. The truth had found a place beneath the dress, beneath the makeup, beneath the story she had planned to tell herself. Across the room, Bradley finally approached, carrying 2 glasses of champagne like props he had forgotten how to use. "There he is," Bradley said, voice bright and strained. "The man of the hour. I have to say, Ethan, you kept that quiet. Impressive. Very impressive." Ethan turned to him with the same calm he had given the podium. "Thank you." Bradley laughed once, too quickly. "Well, I mean, founding shareholder. For 0.8%. That is not exactly pocket change. You must have had one incredible attorney hiding all that." Ethan took the measure of him then. The suit was perfect, the smile trained, the confidence patched together in real time. Men like Bradley always believed every outcome had a trick behind it because that was how they survived, tricks stacked on tricks until the tower looked like a life. "No hiding," Ethan said. "Just structure. And patience." Bradley's jaw tightened under his smile. Lauren looked from one man to the other, seeing the comparison finally without the costume lights she had used before. Bradley filled space. Ethan held it. Bradley performed certainty. Ethan possessed it. The difference had been invisible to her when she only measured shine. A man from the Northbridge board interrupted gently, asking Ethan to meet a few senior partners from the acquiring company. Ethan gave a polite nod, then looked at Lauren. "I hope you enjoy the evening." It was a simple sentence. Civil, controlled, final enough to make her blink. He walked away before she could answer, leaving her beside Bradley with 2 untouched glasses and a truth neither of them could dress up. As Ethan crossed the room, conversations opened for him like doors. He did not look back until he reached the far side, near the marble columns. Lauren was still standing where he had left her, staring at him as if distance had become math she could not solve. Bradley was speaking into her ear, but she was not listening. Her eyes were fixed on the man she had mistaken for unfinished. Ethan accepted a handshake from the board member and let the moment pass through him without swelling his ego. He did not feel triumphant in the way people imagine triumph. No fireworks. No heat. Just a deep, level quiet. The kind that arrives when the truth no longer needs your defense. By the time Ethan left the gala, Columbus had turned silver under a thin mist, the kind that did not fall so much as hang in the air, softening the edges of buildings and streetlights until everything looked like a memory before it had finished happening. He walked out alone with the Northbridge folder tucked under one arm and a wool coat over his suit. The applause from the ballroom still faint in his ears, but already losing its grip on him. That was the strange thing about recognition. When you spend years being unseen, you think being seen will feel like thunder. Sometimes it feels quieter than that. Sometimes it feels like a door closing behind you, not because you were pushed out, but because you finally walked through it. The valet offered to bring his vehicle around, and Ethan almost laughed when he remembered the old Ford was parked 3 blocks away in a public lot with a faded ticket tucked under the wiper. He thanked the young man and kept walking. The night smelled like rain, warm asphalt, and expensive restaurant kitchens venting garlic and butter into the alleyways. His phone buzzed twice in his coat pocket. He did not check it until he reached the truck. Both messages were from Lauren. The first said, "We need to talk when Bradley is not around." The second came 4 minutes later. "Please." I did not understand what I was walking away from. Ethan sat behind the wheel, the cab dim except for the glow of the dashboard. He read the words once. Then again. I did not understand what I was walking away from. The sentence had dressed itself as regret, but underneath it was the same old measurement. Not who she walked away from. What? Not the man. The value. The payout. The room full of people saying his name with respect. He set the phone in the cup holder and started the truck. The engine turned over with its familiar rough cough, then settled into a steady idle. Real. Reliable. Unimpressed. On the drive home, the city thinned into suburbs, glass towers giving way to gas stations, dark strip malls, and sleeping neighborhoods where porch lights burned like small promises. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel, driving the speed limit, letting the rhythm of the road pull him back into himself. The gala had changed nothing about who he was. That was the point. Money had arrived, but it had not created him. It had only revealed the part of him Lauren had been too impatient to recognize. At home, Maple Ridge Drive was quiet. The tire marks from Bradley's Mercedes had faded under new mist. The maple tree moved slightly in the front yard, leaves whispering against one another like a room full of people lowering their voices. Ethan parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment before going inside. The house was dark except for the small lamp he had left on in the entryway. It cast a warm circle over the floor, over the boxes labeled Lauren, over the empty hook where her coat used to hang. He loosened his tie, placed the Northbridge folder on the kitchen table, and poured a glass of water. No champagne, no victory drink, just water from the sink in the house she had called too small. His phone rang at 11:32. Lauren again. This time he answered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He could hear traffic behind her, a car passing over wet pavement, the faint noise of somewhere public trying to sound elegant. Then her voice came through thin and careful. "Ethan, I am sorry." He looked at the window above the sink. His reflection looked tired, older than it had that morning, but not broken. "For what?" he asked. The question was not cruel. It was exact. Lauren inhaled slowly. "For leaving like that. For what I said. For not believing in you." The last sentence almost sounded right. Almost. Ethan let the silence stretch because silence has a way of making people meet themselves. She filled it quickly. "Bradley was not who I thought he was." There it was. The hinge. Not I was wrong about you. Not I was wrong about us. Bradley was not who I thought he was. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them. "What happened?" he asked. She gave him pieces. Bradley had borrowed money he said was tied up in investments. The Mercedes was leased through his company under terms he could barely maintain. The rooftop dinners were charged to a card he was already juggling. He had introduced Lauren as a connection to her firm before introducing her as anything else. His confidence had been scaffolding, not structure. And when Ethan's name appeared on that screen, Bradley's charm had turned brittle. By the time they left the gala, he was angry in that polished social way people get when their reflection stops obeying them. Lauren said she went back to her sister's apartment. She said she felt foolish. She said she had made a terrible mistake. Ethan listened without interrupting, one hand resting on the counter, the other around the water glass. The refrigerator hummed behind him. The clock ticked above the doorway. Normal sounds. Honest sounds. When she finished, her voice softened. "Can I come by tomorrow? I think we should talk in person." Ethan looked toward the hallway, at the boxes he had packed with care, every scarf folded, every frame wrapped, every leftover piece of her life treated better than she had treated the man packing it. No, he said. The word came out. Calm and final. Lauren went quiet. Ethan, please. I am not asking to move back in. I just need to see you. I need to explain. You already explained, he said. You explained when you left. You explained when you got in his car. You explained when you sent me that rooftop picture and told me you hoped I found happiness too. Her breath broke softly on the line. Not dramatic, just human. I was trying to convince myself, she whispered. I know, Ethan said. That was the first gentle thing he had said all night, and maybe the hardest. But I cannot keep paying for the stories you tell yourself. The line stayed open. Somewhere on her end, a door closed. He pictured her standing in a borrowed hallway, shoes hurting, makeup tired, the bright future she had chased already peeling at the corners. Once, that image would have pulled him across the city. Once, he would have grabbed his keys before she even finished apologizing. That man had loved her with both hands and no helmet. He honored that man. He did not let him drive anymore. Lauren said his name again, but it had nowhere to go. Ethan set the glass down. I will have your boxes delivered this week. Robert Caldwell will contact you about the separation paperwork. We will handle this cleanly. Cleanly, she repeated, like the word hurt. Yes, he said. Cleanly. She started to cry then, quietly enough that he almost wished she had done it years earlier, when tears might have meant repair instead of regret. I loved you, she said. Ethan looked at the Northbridge folder on the table, then at the old scratch in the countertop from the first Thanksgiving they hosted, then at the empty chair across from him. I know, he said, but you loved me best when I was useful and worst when I was unseen. That is not the kind of love I can build a future on anymore. He ended the call before anger could arrive and cheapen the truth. Then he stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the house breathe around him. Outside, the mist turned back into rain, soft against the windows. Ethan picked up the gala invitation, folded it once, and placed it inside the fireproof box with the original stock agreement and the faded Christmas photo from the first Northbridge office. Not as proof for anyone else, as a reminder for himself. Some investments take years to mature. Some losses arrive dressed as freedom. And sometimes the person who leaves you behind only teaches you where you were never meant to stay.